Introduction under a sky the color of a bruised plum, the taiga did not scream. It waited. The Siberian winter of 2026 wasn't merely a season. It was an eviction notice served by the earth itself. Anya Volkov, 85 years of grit and fading memories, stood outside her crooked cabin, her breath blooming in the air like ghost flowers. Beside her, Mikhail, a wolf dog with cataracts clouding his eyes and a limp that mirrored her own, sniffed the metallic sharpness of the coming gale. The wind carried the scent of frozen pine and something ancient, something hungry. There was no room for the romanticism of the wild here. Only the weight of the axe in her trembling hand and the heat radiating from the beast's flank remained. Tonight, the horizon was vanishing. The weight of white iron shivering uncontrollably, Anya hauled the last of the birch logs across the threshold. The wood felt like bars of frozen iron against her chest. Every lungful of air was a razor blade cutting through her throat, a reminder that at 85, the body is a house with the windows left open. Behind her, Mikhail let out a low, vibrating growl, his hackles rising like dry grass. He knew. The blizzard wasn't approaching. It was descending. A white shroud meant to bury the world in silence. Inside the cabin, the shadows stretched long and spindly across the peeling wallpaper. Anya didn't bother with the lamp. Kerosene was for the desperate, and she was merely tired. Dropping the wood, she felt the snap of a dry tendon in her shoulder. A grunt escaped her, bitter and short. Through the frosted pane, the trees began to whip violently, their branches scratching against the logs like fingernails on a coffin. "Move, you old rug," she muttered, nudging Mikhail toward the hearth. The dog obeyed with a heavy groan, his joints popping in the quiet room. He smelled of wet wool and wood smoke, a comforting stench that had filled this cabin since her husband's heart had quit a decade ago. Kneeling was a chore of immense proportions. Anya sank to the floor, her knees hitting the rug with a dull thud. Her fingers, gnarled and mapped with blue veins, fumbled with the tinder. Matching the fury outside, the first gust of the storm slammed into the door. The heavy oak groaned. Dust fell from the rafters. It wasn't just the cold that frightened her. It was the pressure, the sheer atmospheric weight of the Siberian waste trying to flatten her existence. For a second, the match wouldn't strike. Phosphorus scraped against the box, a dry, useless sound. Again, nothing. Anya felt a surge of hot, infantile rage. She gripped the match until it snapped. Then, a lick of orange. A tiny, fragile heartbeat of flame caught the birch bark. Watching it, Anya felt the heat reach for her face, chasing away the gray pallor of the frostbite. Mikhail rested his heavy head on her thigh, his labored breathing syncing with the flicker of the fire. Out there, the blizzard was erasing the road, the fence, and the very memory of summer. In here, there was only the smell of scorching wood and the rhythmic thumping of a dog's tail against the floorboards. Survival wasn't a grand gesture. It was a small flame and a heavy dog. The heartbeat in the hearth against the howling void outside, the cabin felt like a ship lost at sea. The wind had shifted into a high-pitched whistle, finding every crack in the chinking, spitting needles of ice onto the floor. By midnight, the temperature had plummeted so far that the water bucket by the stove had a skin of ice an inch thick. Anya lay on the floor, wrapped in 3 layers of reindeer hide, her back pressed against Mikhail's spine. The dog was a furnace of fur and muscle, his internal heat the only thing keeping her blood from turning to slush. Suddenly, a crack like a rifle shot echoed through the room. The roof, the weight of the accumulating snow, was bowing the central beam. Anya bolted upright, or as close to upright as her spine allowed. Fear, sharp and metallic, tasted like copper on her tongue. If the roof gave, the cold would swallow them in seconds. Mikhail was already on his feet, pacing the narrow strip of rug, his throat emitting a constant nervous whine. "Hush, Misha," she whispered, though her own voice sounded thin and alien. She reached out, her hand disappearing into the thick ruff of his neck. He was trembling. To see a creature of the forest afraid made the walls feel even thinner. Looking around the dark room, she realized the fire was dying. The logs she had fought so hard to bring in were now nothing but glowing skeletons. She had to move. Every inch of her skin screamed against leaving the warmth of the furs. Crawling toward the woodpile, she felt the floorboards vibrate with the force of the gale. The blizzard was a physical entity now, kicking at the walls, demanding entry. Grasping a heavy log of larch, she felt the splinters bite into her palm. She didn't flinch. Pain was a sign of life. She heaved the wood into the embers, sending a spray of sparks upward. The light caught Mikhail's eyes, reflecting 2 golden orbs of primal intelligence. He stopped pacing and sat, watching her. In that moment, the hierarchy of human and animal vanished. They were just 2 mammals, 2 hearts, defying the absolute zero of the Siberian night. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, a dull, cramping ache. She hadn't eaten since yesterday's thin broth, but the effort to reach the larder felt like climbing a mountain. Instead, she reached for a piece of dried fish she kept in her pocket for the dog. She broke it in half. They ate in the dark, the sound of their chewing lost beneath the roar of the wind. The larch log finally caught, roaring into life, throwing a defiant red glow against the encroaching frost on the walls. She survived the hour. That was the only victory allowed. The ghost of the morning dawn did not bring the sun. It brought a pale, sickly diffusion of light that barely penetrated the snow piled halfway up the windows. The storm had reached a steady, rhythmic pulse. Anya woke to a silence so profound it felt like deafness. The wind had died, leaving behind a world buried in white silence. She tried to move her legs, but they were leaden, pinned down by the weight of Mikhail, who hadn't moved from his spot across her lower body. Panic, cold and suffocating, flared in her chest. "Misha," she croaked. The dog didn't stir. His fur was tipped with frost where his breath had condensed. Anya pushed at him, her weak muscles screaming. With a heavy, wet sneeze, the dog finally lifted his head. He looked at her, his clouded eyes searching for her face in the gloom. He was alive. The relief was so violent it made her weep, the tears freezing almost instantly on her cheeks. Struggling to her feet, Anya navigated the frozen terrain of her own home. The fire was out. The air in the room was so cold that her spit hissed when it hit the floor. She made it to the door, but it wouldn't budge. Snow had drifted against it, sealing them into a wooden tomb. For a moment, she stared at the door, her mind flickering through images of her youth, of dancing in the village, of her husband's hands, of the scent of summer grass. It would be so easy to lie back down in the furs and let the sleep take her. Instead, she grabbed the small iron shovel by the stove. Mikhail began to dig at the base of the door, his claws scratching a frantic rhythm against the wood. Anya joined him, her movements slow and mechanical. Every shovelful of snow she cleared felt like a pound of flesh she was giving to the mountain. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. Under the pressure of her shoulder and the dog's snout, the door finally gave an inch, then 6. A cascade of fine, powdery snow fell into the cabin. Anya squeezed through the gap, stumbling out into a landscape she no longer recognized. The world was gone. There were no paths, No landmarks, only a vast, undulating sea of white under a sky of piercing, cruel blue. Mikhail leaped into the drifts, his body disappearing and reappearing like a porpoise in the surf. He barked, a sharp, joyful sound that shattered the stillness. Anya leaned against the doorframe, her lungs drinking in the lethally cold, pure air. She was a tiny, gray speck in an infinite wasteland. An 85-year-old woman who had outlasted the blizzard of the century. She looked at her hands, red and raw, and then at the dog waiting for her in the snow. They were still here. The fire was out, but the blood was still moving. And for today, that was enough.